Yes, so the topic of the day is how to manage CPI. And yeah, I sent this out last week and it's like, well, this is probably just going to be a couple of days working from home and figure out how things is going there. But it seems things are changing pretty rapidly at the moment. Anyway, the topic is still relevant, and it is something that is important for companies to figure out how can they actually manage their CPI a little better. And I don't know how many of you guys are working on CPI projects at the moment. Then yeah, I'd also like to hear how many projects have you done with CPI, so I get some kind of an idea about where we are at. If you're new to CPI, obviously have the CPI course. That is a way to go. But yeah, this is just about some of the technical things that exist around the CPI platform that we're able to working on for this. Cool. So what are the things we will be covering this place? Why you need to make integrations? What are the areas that you can improve in? What's the support process? How can we make it easier for you to support your CPI systems? How can we improve the development flow? And then how the Figaf ET is licensed and installed. And we have time for some Q&A at the end. Let's see how fast we are. So why do you need to develop faster? Yeah, I guess in the beginning of the year when I was working on these presentations a lot, you probably look at the project backlog and you can see there's a lot of integrations going on that you need to fix. Right now, I guess it's pretty uncertain. I would assume that most of the business still wants their integration, but maybe can't afford or consultants or extra workers. So there's going to be some challenges in that perspective. Nevertheless, integration is still important and a large part of the process. And yeah, if you're doing a PO to CPI migration, that's also an important part of it. And yeah, I'm really glad that you're here. Spend some time with me to see how you're able to leverage these things. So the common model or problems with SAP integration, it's based on this old model of delivering in the waterfall, and I guess most companies now want a lot more flexible deployment option, being able to take content, deploy it, test it, managing it a lot simpler. You do have a lot of your development that's being outsourced. Let me just... and you want to make sure you know what they're doing. You probably have a point about the documentation and auditing, and in a lot of cases this is really a manual process that is going on. Then we want to update, and upgrades is often postponed, and that's especially for a PI perspective. So where is the Figaf tool able to automate? So it's able to automate the development process. We have some different flows regarding that testing. We started out with a testing tool, and that's where we're coming from. We have a lot in the governance perspective that's interesting. And then we have monitoring of support. I guess Michael will get to that point a little later. Actually, I think it's now. So we wanted to create, so our tool is able to connect both PI, CPI, and API management, and I wanted to create like a generic way that you could handle all of these different requests, and make it a lot simpler for people to manage the flow. And what we are able to do is we have a way we can fetch messages from your PI, your CPI, or your API management. And the way we would select them is not just, I guess the default one is an error, but in some cases error really doesn't cut it, because you want to have the one that have a specific status, like has status logged or error or something like that, so you can see what's going on in these perspectives. We want to have a way that you can set up XPath in it, so it's really simple, something that all integration developers know. How do we actually create and match alerts, so we can see when an alert happens again and again, what's the data that we need to look into it. We want to have a notification either to an email to a specific user saying, hey, there's a problem with the message we tried to send to you, or you try to create, please update the master data, or just to the general support, we have a problem on the specific interface, give them all the information they need to resolve it. You can also send a webhook to Jira or some other location. And then a really important part is you're able to mute alerts. So a lot of time, if you have scheduled jobs, you will get the same alert again and again, and we have made it possible to just say, okay, we got this alert, we have seen it before with the same properties, hence we will just ignore it for now. And that's the goal of that muting. And we have an option to do reprocessing in CPI also. So let me show you what this looks like. So let me just create so here we have the CPI agent. We have the option to create polling agents that are looking for OData filters. Now we're just looking at something that has status logged, but it could also, or status failed, it could also be all other OData properties. You can set it into it. We also have the option to look at CPU usage and stuff like that in this perspective. So what it will do once it has created that is it will then we're not getting enough alerts. Is it will download all of these messages that we have, and we can see we got one here. We can look here. We can see it has already a specific rule ID. That means that someone has been in, figure out, have we seen this before? What kind of alert is it going on? We can see all the information about the alert. We can see the error. We can see the iflow. We can see the package. We can view the URL, and if there was attachments, we would be able to see them in here. If we open the alert that is corresponding to this one, we have the option here to specify that we do not want to see, if we see the same alert in 60 minutes on this topic, then it doesn't matter. But after the 60 minutes, if we see the same alert, we will trigger it again. And here you can see the XPath that's created that does fetch this data, and we can test it, and we can see this would then be the mail that we would be sending to some user, or the webhook we could send that would then create this flow. And as Michael talked about, we do have an option to do retry, and the way, so obviously there's two standard approaches from SAP to do retry. They are to use the GMS or the database to save some of the payload in, and then being able to reprocess it. Our approach to this is we are creating an attachment. We probably will be changing that at some point in time to some of the other data structures. So in the beginning of the flow, you would add a small script that will take the incoming message, put it into a property, and then if the flow fails, it will then log this message to an alert, and then from the alerting tool we are then able to take this message out and do retry on these specific cases. So it's really simple to do retry on these messages with this tool. So it's just adding 2 scripts into it, and then it can run with that purpose. I hope that was what you're looking for, Michael. So then what we will build up is we'll build up a set of these different rules that is then being executed one by one. So we'll just go after them in this order. And once we have found the correct alert, we'll just trigger that. Otherwise, we will end up with the default rule that then everybody will, or the person in charge will then get. So yeah, it's pretty simple to set up and handle alerts in this way. Any questions on this?
In PO where you said, okay, stop message and then
yeah, no, I don't think we have that. I think there was some workaround feature for that.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw exactly the block.
But I guess that's the only way really to do it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
That was my
Yep. Good. Other questions? Let me just unmute like that. One of the other things I've also seen is this, that once you're doing monitoring of a CPI, you want to see 1 or 2 or 3 iflows together, or see what's going on with these. We have added go back to the monitor. A way that we can go in, we can create and say which iflows we want to see in a specific monitor. So we can say for HR we want to see these 5 iflows. For some other tool we want to see these other iflows. And we can say past day statuses and what's going on. And then once you have that, just see here. Let me just get a message in also. But yeah, and then you can assign users, and so they can get access to your HR or your other flow that you have. So some people will be able to see what's going on here, and we see we got some data being scheduled here. We got access to attachments, and we'll also add the data store preference for it. And if we just refresh now, we should get a new one. So that is the process regarding that. But the base is to give users a better understanding about where messages is sent and received to, and then give a little easier monitor, hopefully. And then you have some insight about how your CPI is performing. You can see when it's being changed or when there's a reboot. So you can see there was a reboot at these specific point in times, and you can see the load, how many messages, are there any things we need to be alerted on what's going on. And you can set triggers up and say, okay, if the CPU usage is above something, or the latency of the standard iflow is above something, it's something you need to consider and figure out how do we actually deal with these things. Good. So that was the monitor. Any questions to that part? Then let's look at the development flow, because I guess that is where a lot can be achieved. There's a lot of manual steps involved in creating CPI, deliver it, managing it, and we started out doing a test tool, but found to do that we had to know a lot about the PI and CPI system. We needed to understand and being able to transport and manage and configure things, and then it ended up actually be a full tool to do the full development process as you are working on. So if we talk about the governance, we started out with testing. And the way we are creating test cases is we set the iflow to trace mode, and we do that automatically. So let me go into here. We select our iflow. We say record messages. We can create a test case, test suite where we can add these content into it. We can create messages based on this content. We can extract the data based on XPath if we want to. So what has happened now is we've created a test suite where we want to combine one or more results into it. And what we can then do is we can trigger this. This will then switch the iflow into trace mode. And then I can trigger a message that will then send content to this iflow, and once the iflow is processed, we can download all the messages. So from all the different steps in this process, we can download. We are able to see what the status is and how things are going on. So we can see it's now completed, and if we look at it, we can see it has 27 outbound, so we have one incoming message, which is the first one we log, and then we have a bunch of outgoing messages where we can view and edit these things and see what's going on in it for these things. So we have full access to all the data in this test case and what's going on here. So now we have the data for a test case. We can then create it, and it just say here which are the systems we are allowed to run this on, where it's being deployed, and we just want the single one. And with that, we can run it. We can both see on which systems current mapping. Here we can see this iflow can be run on these different systems, but we just want to run it on our standard development system. And what this normally will do is it will send the data in as this is a normal SOAP message or HTTP, so it's just a standard interface we can trigger. If it is not like that and there is specific requirements for it, we have the option to run with mock data. And what that would mean is if we run the iflow in that, so we'll run it again, and what this will then do is it will create a mocked service. So hopefully we can see it's being deployed. So it will create a new iflow that looks similar to the original one, but where all the services is, instead of calling the original endpoint, will call the Figaf tool. Since this is an on-premise installation, it will then use the cloud connector to get access to our PI system. But yeah, if you have it in cloud, you don't need to have the cloud connector there. We can then pull the results. Maybe it will take a little longer for this. It needs to deploy it first before it can trigger these messages. So maybe I should not have done that. Let's see if we can see the other one. Unfinished runs. Pull the results of this one. Maybe there's some data already here. And we can see it's downloading the messages now. Mapping configuration. we can then get the result and see what's going on in this case. So let's see if this report is done. It's not done yet. So if it was all test was done or they were successful, we'll be able to see them here. Let's see if the other one is pull remote result. If it is able to pull these messages down. Okay, so now we can see it is working. And here we have the option to view the results. And here we can see there's a lot of errors going on. And we can obviously go in and check what's the errors we are getting here. And this is just that there's a different content type in because we are obviously triggering it in a different way. We can then just click and add this, so we will no longer see this as an ignore element, and we can see the same up here and on all these contents. So if we just wanted to see this iflow, we can see the status or the information about this in here. And here we can see these requests are then pointing to the Figaf server via Cloud Connector as a way of getting the data we have. If we look at the original one, they are calling an OData service. So that's a little under testing. One thing we will cover a little later is creating of Groovy services based on this. So yeah, we did talk about this, that we could use mocked data, and that is really interesting if you have calling success factors scenarios, because there's often something like query number of employees, run some data on top of that, map these, and if you are doing this normally, it will then not mean these users have been changed or something else happened. So it's, yeah, if you are doing development that perspective, it is a lot simpler to have it with this. The other thing we have that makes this also relevant for HR testing and a lot of other confidential thing is we have a secured mode. And that means that if you're creating test data from specific backend systems, where you have, so here we have our list of agents, we have marked some as has confidential data, and that means if we have created test data from this specific system, all the data in the Figaf tool will be masked, and it is then just, you're not allowed to use this on specific systems. So you can say, okay, we can only run this test data on these specific systems. And let me just show you what these confidential data look like for CPI. So we have one here that's called CPI secure data, and obviously if you're testing with this, the data needs to be or you need to run it with mock data, because otherwise it will anyway send it to the receiving system, and that's not what you want here. You just want to send the message out, get the expected payload sent into it without having to do anything with it. And here we can then see the messages. If we go to edit mode, we can see the same payload, the same structure, but we have removed all the critical elements. Because I have the role has sensitive data, I can uncheck this, and then I can see the real payload and the real value. So this enables you to have contractors fixing your mappings, working on some of the things. You'll be able to test it without really knowing what's going on, to give you a whole other level of testing capabilities. So that was the secure testing. next up is, okay, so now we have created a new iflow. We want to make sure we know what's being changed between two versions. We want to make sure we know a lot more about the audit trail, who is the reason for making this specific change. So the way we have done that is if you, for instance, on your CPI iflow, so we are continuously downloading all your CPI artifacts. No, that's not that. In the strange tracking tool, it will download the full CPI repository, and then from here you can then see all the data that is there. You can sort it and see what was changed last by which user. And we have our flow we're working on here. We can open it directly from here, go to the status page. We can edit it, and let me just change a bit of the scripting here. So we'll just change this XSLT to call this number 3, and let me also just change this content modifier to 1.2. We'll save it as a new version. We'll deploy it. And then in the Figaf tool, we will then synchronize this again. And with this synchronization, it will then download all information about the repository. So we will get all the information needed about why this was, or all the things that was being changed by this. We can see we got 1 new object, 2 new versions, and this is also something that schedule in background can run whenever you have, every 5 minutes or something like that, to see are there any changes, who have made these changes, and what's going on. And this will also fetch configuration values. We are just in the process of adding value mapping, so to also be able to see value mappings in this. So we can see here we have our version here. It's 46, so means we can actually see there should be a script that was changed, an XSLT mapping. So we can see this one was changed in this version. If we want to see specifically what was changed in the iflow, we also have the option here to compare two versions. And we have created here a simplified model because the BPM model can be a little challenging to actually see what's going on. So we can see it's 2 different versions here. We can see that this script has been changed since this version to this version. And we can also see in which element where something changed in. So we can actually go in and see it was this value that was changed in this specific content. So that bit, we now know what has been changed. We can go in and handle this. So we now have the option to create a ticket, and a ticket in our perspective is it's not going to be a replacement of Solman, Jira, or whatever you're using to have cases in, but a way to document what's being changed for a specific business reason. So we create this. We can specify which landscape it needs to be going on. We can specify the external IDs that's being used in this. We can put in some extra description so people in the future will be able to know what's actually being changed by this. So with that, we have now created a ticket with all the information required. So we can see it's this object currently. We have edited it. We should probably also add there's the iflow that's specified as a part of this, but for now it's okay. We can look up what kind of test cases we have, and we can see we got all of these test cases, and we got the one we just created. So obviously you need to manage these test cases and say, okay, there's some of these that is no longer relevant, so we can just run this on our specific system. And what this will then do is will run this precisely the same way as we've seen before. It will try to send the message. We can see what are the differences are between this. And we can then go in and say, okay, now we know this is our completed test case, so we can open the result here. And we can see there's some differences here, so let's just check this difference. So let's see here, this was the demo 2 to demo 3 we added, so that's okay. And then there's another one down here, div, that is just that once the group is there, and you will then obviously go through all the different errors that you have, accept them, and you can then go update. So once we have gone through the scene that everything is acceptable, then we'll just say, okay, now next time you run it, this is what you expect to get out of this. If we had alerts that triggered us to create something, we can also attach the alerts to here. So from the alert you can create an iflow or trigger that this is happening here. We then have transport, so we can create a transport, and we are creating the transport based on this specific iflow that we have in this case. And we now have created a specific transport for this specific iflow. And you can have more iflows in, and next release will also have the ability to transfer packages and value mappings. The thing we also have that is really useful is you have the option here to specify, once you go into the QA or productive system, what are the endpoints that we want to call. What are the username? What are the passwords that we're using? And as we can see here, it is this value does not exist on that specific system, so we will actually get an error. We can update it and say, okay, now it's okay. But you know a lot more about what's going on this system. So that means, you here in the development phase will just send it to approval. I'm not sure if I'm approving this. I am. So most cases, you would probably not be an approver on the same iflow, or you would have some guys that are responsible for doing the QA and approval and say, okay, this follows our naming convention. We have something on validity, and we'll see what kind of patterns we can put into this. CPI lint would obviously be a good way to get some more validation about what's going on, and see if it follows your naming conventions and stuff like that. I'm approver, so I also got the approve button. If I was not approver, I could not approve it. I have the option to reject it and give a reason saying, hey, this is not really cool, you should not be doing that. So we'll say, cool, that's good. And now we have the option to import it, and what it will do with the import, it will go and configure it and apply the configuration, deploy it, and then once it's done that, the iflow will work, and you can then run the test cases on top of this. So now everything's imported successfully. We can see we're still getting our error because it says, hey, this password 2 does not exist. So we'll just leave it there. We can then go into, because we are we just have one CPI system, we are just putting it into virtual packages for our QA, and but if you have multiple different PI systems, you can obviously let it go to those instances, and it would not create this prefix and postfix. Was not that one? I guess it is called. Figaf QA. So here we have the iflow we have just deployed. It's version 46. If we look at the configuration, we can see the API key is what we change it to in the process. So that was what we wanted to do when we were doing our transports. We could import all of these different things. We can then go here, we can see based on this instance what has been changed. We can look at, so there's versioning of all these different objects, so we can go and check the versioning and see what is it that this user has done of changes between two different versions. So we got full visibility about all the changes that's required. We can say result means we are satisfied with the result, and then we can create a report that just say, hey, all these things you have in your process is what you need. So there you have it. So we can see all the attached objects. We have the test cases that we run. Last time we ran the process and what were the errors. And obviously you would just expect this to be green because you have managed and run around with these test cases. Any questions on this this topic? So that was how we see it's possible to manage CPI there. So connections to CPI requires CPI credentials, but connections to PO needs to be installed. So the process for PO is a little different. When we're doing testing on PO, we prefer to install an agent because it gives them some better options. But obviously you cannot use a cloud version of IRT to run on towards the PI. The way we're configuring these agents is just that you in here specify you have this this agent. It's this name we're calling it. You're specifying where it should go and what's going on there. For PO credentials, we also just need an agent user that we can use. This agent user will then also do modifications that's required. So adding modules, doing transports and managing transport. So just the same way as when you're transporting something, it will also be able to configure communication channels in the full landscape. I hope that covers it. Otherwise, please ask again. So yeah, that was the idea about creating a global landscape that can handle these things. So let me see how many of these slides I skipped. Never replaced Jira Solman. You have this full visibility about what's being transported, when it's being transported. You have this virtual environment. So if you only have two-tier landscape, it will create the iflow, and then it will make some of these the URLs change so it points to the right direction. So you can have multiple landscapes, and obviously this will be something that could also be bundled with having developers have access to their own CPI instance running that way. But let's see. And we show the documentation. One thing we also have for documentation is now we have created this this ticket, but we would obviously want to specify some information about our iflow. So we can take our iflow, we can create a scenario documentation on this, and what this will give us is like this. So here we can see all the different tickets that's been created. What are the different connections that's being configured in this? What are the test cases we have for this? When were the last run and the statuses? What is the flow that we have and what's going on in it. We have the configurations and the different tiers of our landscape. And then we have a list of all the resources and when they were last changed. So you get a lot more information about what's going on. So one thing, we also have the option to have shared resources. So a shared resource is our way of handling the thing that you have a script in a specific location, but you want to use it in multiple other iflows. If you make a change in that specific script, you want to be able to figure out where to replicate it out and update it. So it's our way of handling that. So you can just see here, are there any, not on this one, so you can take a script and link it and use that as a shared script, and then it will handle synchronization, so it sees when a shared object has been changed, it will then look into it. Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, just put them into the chat. We can take them later. Just one thing more. This is our development process, and yeah, if you have done a lot of UI or CPI development, you probably know the web UI is okay to do message mappings and linking to scripts and figure out what to do. But if you want to do any serious development of scripts, XSLT, Vistals, whatever, you want to use a better tool that can do that. And our approach to this was to use a Git repository, because I guess everybody is anyway trying to figure out how to use Git, how to create Git workflows, how to manage these different kind of things. So that was the whole point on this. And yeah, it's a simple way to give access and share data and on this. So the way it works is you will then take your CPI repository. So the Figaf tool will listen to the CPI repository, download that, and then once you have configured a Git, it will then say, okay, now push all of this into the Git repository, and then the user can, in the Git repository, see all these different things that happens, what's being executed and stuff like that. We have also added some plugins to this, so I'm not really a good Java developer, and setting up Gradle, a lot of all these manual tasks is something I would prefer not to do. So my team prepared a lot of templates that actually say, okay, take this, copy it, and then you have all the information that you need for this to run. So let me just show you that part. So in our Git repository, in our agents, you may have seen it, just briefly showed it. We have this option to specify a Git repository, and it can be any repository you have. You want to create a specific branch that you sync to. And what will then happen is you can then connect your Git to it. You can go in, you can download it, or pull it from this repository, and what you will then see is once you have built it up and started out, you will get all these different templates. So you will just copy all the templates, remove the ERT, and with that it will give you all the information that you actually need to run this. So the only thing you need to install is to download the CPI libraries, and then that's it. And now I have just pulled it, and let's see if we can see here the webinar demo that we updated is now updated to this version. So one of the things I also prefer not to do is to code Groovy online, because it's just a little too complicated. And the way we're doing this is that you can go into your test suite that you have, or test cases you have. You have the option then to open the test case again. We have our here, and then we have one box up here that says generate Groovy test data. We can add it to the Git repository, or we can download it if we do not have Git installed. And what this will do is it will then try to find in and output messages for all of this. And if we go to our repository again, then hopefully, so we can see now for the header process 2, we only have 2 test data for it. Hopefully, if this works, we should have 3 and 6 test data. But what we have then built into this is a way that will just give you all the test data that you have. So if we open one of these, we can see this is the header input properties and the body we expect, and this is the output. And we can then run this. So if we run, let's just take the small one. Now we have 3 different test data on it, so maybe there will be some differences in this. So we can see we're getting some alerts. We're saying, hey, there was the property new error has demo value, but we expected 10. So we know we can run it here. We can see what's going on. If we go into it was header 2 we were editing, we can set up a breakpoint. Header 2 debug. So that means we can actually see what this would look like if we ran it for real. If I set it up correctly. So here we can see the status in our debug mode. That's probably okay. We'll just close this run. So let's just make a small modification here. So we'll call this 60. We will just save it. And we have the option here to upload the iflow directly. So instead of having to go into a Git or into a CPI, we can actually just upload it directly from here. And yeah, it took a couple of seconds. We can then deploy it also from here without having to do a lot of tricks. So that means it's really simple to run. We also have we can run our Figaf templates from here also. So once it's been deployed, it will then run, and we can see if it works as we expected. So that's the Git. It's about creating a standard repository with all the information that you need, being able to see versions of these things, and obviously we also have the configuration in here. I think we had. So here we have. I think this is the. Here we have the configuration for the specific iflow. So I hope this makes sense. Any questions, do let me know. And just so you can see, I didn't all make this up, that there was actually a small change. We can go to our iflow, the real one. And we can see it's now in drafts. But that's also one of the things we can also create. So we can see now directly from our Groovy, we could upload it here. We can also specify that you want to deploy it as a new version. But I think in most cases you anyway just want to edit these script resources, go in, do the modification, and create the resource. And then it will do synchronization, and it will come all the way back to the CPI or to the Git repository. Any questions on this? Do let me know. Yeah, so all of these are open source plugins that you can use to do modification of if you want to see or have some improvements on. But there's all the changes you need to configure. So it's not about spending a lot of time setting this up because it's already created. Getting started is pretty simple. You can set up a proof of concept in probably 5 minutes. It takes to download the EAT, run it on your your laptop connected to an agent or 2 agents if you want to do transports. I guess one thing we just skipped was you can create landscapes. And in the landscapes you can then specify what are the systems involved in this, who is reviewer of these things, and we can specify the name of this. And when this becomes really useful is that you will then get direct links to all the different tenants you have in your system. So that was the thing I was just missing. So it's pretty simple to set up. We also have a cloud running, instance running. Currently we do not support Git in that, but I guess that's one of the things we're working on. There's an extended trial until May 30th, where you can test 100 ICOs, iflows, use the Git integration, use the documentation, and on either on the cloud or on the on-premise installation, depending on where you want the data and what kind of security you want on it. But it is pretty simple to get started. Licensing. This is our current license model. For the cloud, we have a smaller package, and if you want that for your on-premise, we can also find something on this. And this cloud version is the full that support this full flow that we have seen today with monitoring, change tracking. Let's see if we also get the Git working. I think that's pretty important also. And then it's license per the number of iflows that you're using to manage with the system. So some of the things we're adding: transport of CPI packages and value mappings, versioning of documents. We are looking at an API for tickets and a PI to CPI test first and then migration later, as part of the things we are looking at. So I think that was, we can save money on the integration. Some of all these manual tasks that you have, understanding what's being changed, who runs this, and obviously you don't need to build an infrastructure to handle your CPI integrations first. So you can sign up at figaf.com/IRT to get started. Once you're in there, you will see a lot of quick start guides on how to get started, how to set it up, how to configure it. So that was what I wanted to cover. Any questions or comments, then please let me know. And I can also allow you to unmute yourself. So if you have comments, questions, do unmute yourself or do put them into the chat. I'd love to hear your take and feedback on these things.